Alright, I'm going to try to make this video kind of fast. Just a quick response. You talked about how we need government regulation for different types of industries because industries don't know how to take the proper care level. First of all, I want to narrow your topic because it's not narrow enough. It's important to distinguish between the different types of regulations that there are. And this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to go back and explain what a lot of this stuff is. When we talk about government regulations, there are all kinds of different regulations, but there are predominantly two categories. One has to do with direct economic regulations on companies or people or whatever, which don't have anything to do with costs, which are directly between a consumer and a producer of a product. For example, the government may regulate a car company and say, all the cars you make have to get 25 miles per gallon. Or they may say, if you're going to hire any employees, you have to pay them at least $7.50 an hour, minimum wage law. Those are direct economic regulations. Most of the regulations you discussed have to do with externalities, which are externalities are when a company, typically a company, does something and it harms a third party. So for example, a car company has a factory and they dump pollution in a town's water supply. That harms a third party who's not involved in the transaction. For example, I buy a car from GM. GM polluted Detroit's water supply. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the transaction between me and GM. That has to do with GM releasing a byproduct that affects a third party. So I believe predominantly the examples you talked about, for example, the oil spill and the coal mines and all of these other ones, have to do primarily with injuring third parties. And so those are externalities regulations. Now, externalities regulations, I largely agree with you. Government has an important role to play in regulating externalities. I think where we differ is what you do to solve the problem and what I do to solve the problem. Free market economists like myself would say, in order to correct externalities problems, we have to force companies to internalize the costs that they externalize. So, for example, if let's use the oil spill for example. If the oil spill causes $10 billion worth of damage, or I don't know how much this current one is, but let's just say an oil spill causes $10 billion worth of damage, we force the oil company to pay $10 billion, and therefore they have to internalize the costs that they externalize onto other people. This forces all companies to take the proper care level, or the socially beneficial care level, in which everyone would be better off. Your solution is to have direct government regulation, which says you have to have certain things so that certain disasters never happen. Now, in some cases, these types of regulations work, and they work well because they don't really make much of a difference. But on the whole, most of these regulations, what they do is they'll say you have to spend a certain amount of money, and it'll force companies to take higher care levels than is socially beneficial, and then they will end up spending more money on care than is necessary, and society loses out. I could explain this a little more in detail, but I've only got a minute left, so I'm just going to wrap it up. At the end of the day, I think we have to force employers and companies to pay the damages that they cause, and that means having strict liability in lawsuits that come against companies for damages that they cause. That, I think, is the #1 way we're going to solve that case. I'll give you a perfect example of where that's worked. We established strict liability in tort litigation for products liability back with Escola, I believe it was the case. And since then, all products in basically every sector of the economy have gotten much safer, and that's without government regulation. So my time's up, and it's your turn now. Bye.